Extras.
The first time they fought a Dark Ancient, when Temple 1 took over Ginneron controller, it really just used the crazy abilities of the controller, and they were unable to put much pressure on it, so it was not a good example of how the Dark Ones normally fight. This time around, as they battled Beta, his enormous and varied suite of abilities left them reeling, but a great deal of that is because most of my players are not especially familiar with 3.5 edition psionics. Psionics are a little more complicated than traditional PHB magic, and while I feel arcane and psionic pure casters are fairly equal in power, each form of casting having different strengths, psionics always seems overpowered to the unfamiliar, and frankly, it is flat out stronger for monsters who can afford to blow a ton of resources on a single fight, as compared to a psionic player character who has to budget her powers over an entire day's worth of adventuring. Without getting any deeper into psionics here, the players had the problem that neither they nor their characters had any idea how Dark Ancients work prior to this fight. Afterward, I explained a bit based on what their characters had witnessed or could deduce, but not understanding their opponent made the encounter much deadlier than it had to be, particularly since the Dark Ancient is an intelligent opponent who was quite happy to allow them to underestimate him. As mentioned in the video, he spread out his first round's melee attacks, which is a pretty bad way to win any fight, but it turned out that he did so only to accurately assess each target, and then focused really hard on killing the most dangerous one thereafter. So, how do these things work? How do you kill them? Dark Ancient is actually a custom 3-level prestige class I devised. I could have done it as a template, but I like it better this way, particularly since I've got other custom monster PRCs for my setting already. The requirements for becoming a Dark Ancient are unknown, but based on what we've seen, it probably requires some psionic ability, and one assumes the requirements must be fairly steep, since the first level in the class represents a radical change to the Warforged. Their main ability at level 1 is to sever the connection between their mind and their physical form, forever shedding their body. They retain their number of hit dice, but those hit dice are all changed to D4s, and they lose all hit point bonuses from Constitution, since they no longer have any physical stats. That sounds pretty fragile, but each of the 3 levels of their prestige class gives them 12 hit points, that's max D12. And this new HP total is referred to as their true hit points. The Dark Ancient is now a being of pure mental energy, clinically immortal, but still needs a body to survive, either a construct or a living construct, the Warforged creature type. They use the host's body's physical stats, strength, dex, and con, and because constructs have horrible saves, they add their charisma bonus to saving throws. Any damage they take is applied to the body's hit points, but whenever the body suffers damage, after DR or other defenses, the stress causes the Dark Ancient to suffer 1/4 of the net damage to its true hit points. So a Dark Ancient dies if it's in a body at the time of death, or if it's reduced to 0 true hit points. The unnatural way in which they overtake and control a body puts a great deal of strain on it, causing the shell to wear out quickly. Warforged are best suited for them and can function as a host for decades, whereas they tend to burn through true constructs in only a few years, because their consciousness is less compatible. To this end, they learn the Mind Transfer supernatural ability, which forces a target to make a will save or have its mind destroyed, its body occupied indefinitely by the Dark Ancient. The save DC is fairly powerful based on the caster's intelligence, but an intelligent target gets +5 to resist, making it much harder to take them over. They can, however, transfer themselves automatically with no save into a purpose-built or vacant body, or into any body the Dark Ancient has previously occupied, since, when they leave a body, it is left without any mind or AI. That was all the first level of the class, and most of the class, frankly. But by taking a second level in the PRC, they gain the backup ability, which allows them to make a mind transfer attempt as an immediate action once per day. This is a very important part of their toolkit, because it allows them to take significant risks in a body, knowing they can abandon ship at the moment of death, as long as there is another valid target within range. Once this ability is used up, though, they must be very careful not to put themselves in a position where their body could realistically be killed too fast for them to transfer out. Even with backup, they usually want to position a previously used body somewhere nearby, so they don't have to rely on a failed saving throw to escape death. There's more to them too, but this is the key information you need if you want to set out to kill one. Certainly they don't make it easy. If you had the potential to live forever, I imagine you'd be pretty careful and take every precaution you can think of to mitigate risk. It was a little scary just how accurately Draven guessed Beta's escape route, not that it helped them to find the buried homunculus without knowing that this was what it really did, or the maximum range of the mind transfer. But either that range was extremely long, or they can transfer into a prepared body without line of sight. I try to write and perform the story as clearly as possible in Tales from My D&D campaign, but there are a lot of places where the line between in-character and out-of-character comments becomes blurred. I'm narrating and doing almost every voice. My Draven voice in particular is essentially my own voice, with more of a Draven-y speech pattern. Early on, I started using my logo to show when I was speaking as the GM to the players, to try and differentiate that from regular narration to you, the viewers. So here, I introduced the shot of the players, represented by their characters, all seated around the table, to do the same sort of thing for them, because a lot of funny things they say are in character, and some things blur the line. Often I show talk about die rolls as though it were in character, even though clearly it is not. But there are also some very funny comments that don't make any sense in character, like a lot of the things Black says. Some of you may know Black's player, Briarstone, from his YouTube channel and nightly gaming streams. Briarstone can be pretty funny, and as you can imagine, says some pretty random things, but in our campaign, his character, Black, is really an upstanding and or uptight kind of a straight man. This leads to situations like the infamous urinal sequence, where Little One can be very serious in character about how he wants to deface the head of their inhuman opponent, and Draven, given how stressed out he was by the encounter and pissed off, can go along with it in a way that can arguably be in character, but it's pretty hard to take Black's contribution to that silly tangent as something his character would really say. And as he put it himself later in a session, "I wish I were a less serious character so I could show up in court with my nose powdered brown." You know, brown-nosing. The revelation that Mahar is a skeleton raises a number of serious questions. One such question is, how was he concealing his undead nature around a bunch of wise and or intelligent heroes? Well, firstly, there's an advantage to hiding in plain sight. The fact that he's the trusted companion and guardian of a cleric, who introduced them both as undead hunters, and who worships a demigod whose main defining characteristic is the enforcement of the natural order of death, which explicitly includes destroying or preventing the creation of undead. Once the party accepted those facts, and there was plenty of evidence to back it up, the heroes were far less likely to suspect that one of the pair could himself be undead. In addition to wearing face-covering desert-slash-ninja garb, Mahar actually has a hat of disguise, so at all times the enchanted hat's illusion makes him appear to be a flesh-and-blood human, if you could see his skin, in case his scarf or gloves should slip, and he also makes sure to show his face and hands occasionally, usually just briefly, so that their companions would never think that anything was odd about him. Although Mahar's bearing was somewhat aloof, mostly keeping to himself, there were certainly metaphorical cracks in the disguise that arose as time went on, due to the close and frequent interactions with other members of the party. I think the inflection point where it started to be known or suspected by most of the characters came while riding in Draven's caravan before the golem fight. Draven and Ivana had one wagon mostly to themselves, because, you know, it's their wagon. but that meant the rest of the party were in pretty close quarters, and here Angel confirmed her suspicions with her scent ability. Though she had only splashed a level or two of Sword Sage at this point, one of the martial stances she'd taken was Hunter's Sense, which gave her the scent ability normally reserved for monsters. It's a decent backup for detecting invisible foes if Little One wasn't around or couldn't spot them, and she used it frequently when her other stance, the one that gives bonuses when fighting on difficult terrain, was not required. And it wasn't that she smelled Mahar's nature, so much as that she didn't smell him. As a skeleton who kept very clean, he had virtually no odor. At the very least, he lacked the smells a flesh-and-blood human would produce, especially after strenuous activity. The players have had a bit of a tricky time deciding to bring up the skeleton issue with Zahir, though. It's tough to sort out when the right time would be, given that out of character they've known from very early on, and they simultaneously don't want to give him a free pass based on their out-of-character knowledge. But they also don't want to ignore it in character just for convenience. Regardless, I think everyone was kind of waiting for Black to figure it out himself in character, because he seemed the least likely to react well to it. This is all skirting the real question you all have, though. Why the hell is the henchman of an undead hunting cleric, of an undead hating demigod, freaking undead? Well, here's the thing. Anku, the shepherd of lost souls, the near deity who enforces the rules of death, whatever that means, there's a set of rules, and he and his followers enforce them. But that doesn't mean the rules all make sense to your mortal logic. For example, his followers, or at least Zahir and the cleric who instructed him, have not received clear guidance on how to deal with dragons. They know elves are fine, because their clinical immortality is working as intended. Trolls are vile, and must be opposed, imprisoned, or destroyed if it were possible somehow to stop them from regenerating, because the way Delvash changed them is not okay, according to Anku's mysterious rules. But Zahir and his teacher don't know whether dragons in their seemingly immortal span are an abomination or not, almost as though Anku himself is unsure about them. Anku also has a duty to return lost souls where they belong, which generally means the heavenly dream realm of Amara or the nightmarish hells of Asmodeus. What criteria he uses are totally unknown. Priests like Zahir know how to deal with most ghosts, trapped spirits, and wandering souls, but even they don't know what happens after releasing them to Anku's care. They don't know how Anku judges them. What they do know is that sometimes Anku keeps the souls under his care for quite some time, rather than sending them onward. Is it a sort of purgatory, or a form of asylum to heal wounded spirits? Maybe both. The fact is, Anku occasionally sends a spirit back to the physical world for a time. Is it to accomplish some goal of his? Or to serve some kind of penance for the acts the individual made in life? That would seem pretty strange, since Anku is neutral, and you wouldn't think he'd be so concerned with good or evil. There is a theory, though, among Zahir's fellow shepherds, that souls such as Mahar's are still in judgment, that perhaps Anku requires more evidence before assigning them to one fate or to the other. Regardless, while undead guardians like Mahar are not especially common among the small clergy of Anku, there is a long and storied tradition of their service. As far as Mahar, though, he doesn't really talk about himself or his history. Hard to say what lies in his past, or what motivates him beyond the fulfillment of an oath to protect Zahir. Interestingly, Zahir himself is, in some small part, not alive. Remember in Extras 20, when I retold his backstory, how he trudged on long past the point where he should have starved to death, following a light which he could not possibly have seen through the mountains. He really did pass beyond the realm of the living in some way, which is represented stat-wise by his having taken the tomb-tainted soul feat. It's a feat from a book called the Libris Mortis, which has a lot of info on Undead, and which introduced the Archivist, an intelligence-based divine spellcaster who works more like a wizard, and who many people consider overpowered. Now, Zahir isn't an Archivist, though Draven's son Tobin is training as one, but the feat Zahir got from this book effectively inverts his relationship to positive and negative energy. He is actually healed by negative energy and harmed by positive energy, like all the standard healing magic, though he doesn't gain any other undead traits from the feat. Of course, when he explained this to the others, and once they understood why, that may have helped them to overlook the fact that he heals Mahar with negative energy. They're both from the same order, right? It must just be an Anku thing. There was so much going on when they visited the court, so many NPCs there I couldn't possibly go into them all, and in a way I didn't, since most of them did not have a full stat block. It's nice to have a party who, however crazy they might seem at times, can be counted on not to engage in combat with anyone who doesn't at the very least annoy them somehow. Obviously you have King Edward, the ruler of Vistria, but the first thing of note is that the ruler in exile of Randy, King Hando, sits right beside him, or actually Hando's throne is set very slightly further back, and this really signifies the relationship between the two royal families. For 170 years, the Verandi royals have been honored guests, treated with all the respect they are due, but although King Hando is considered king of all the descendants of the Vistrian refugees who fled the invasion, and though he does resolve disputes between them and give them direction, his real power is little more than that of an ombudsman. He raises their concerns, brings problems to the attention of King Edward or his counselors, and helps to find solutions. But King Hando cannot make binding legal decrees or adjudicate disputes between his people and the citizens of Vistria. As kind, open, and reasonable as King Edward is, he has all the power, and King Hando has essentially none, and his position leaves him implicitly indebted to his host. It's a very awkward situation, and ever since they escaped their falling kingdom, the royals of Verandi have had to struggle to remain relevant, and to prevent the situation of their people from worsening as Vistrian peasants demand a greater share of the country's strained resources and food. As seen in the video, King Edward's council includes Lady Sarah Redfield, Marshal of the Military Forces of Vistria, as well as the sister of the Earl of Redfield, Chancellor John Unther, who is the brother of the Count of Unther, but is not actually the Herald. That was a simplification I made for the video to avoid introducing and having to draw even more characters. Lord Unther is actually the king's most trusted political advisor, which in this monarchy is not about popularity and being re-elected, but rather about helping to build consensus and to try and prevent or dampen conflicts between the many nobles of the realm. To the right of the twin thrones, we have chaplains who represent the three major religions of Vistria. Bishop Fields is a high-ranking priest of Larathal, the god of weather and harvests, who is the most popularly worshipped of the gods, both here and in most parts of the Fadelands, if not all three planes. He has a fancier title because their organization is quite large, with clergy in almost every town performing rites for planting season, harvest, and all year round. By contrast, Radley, the representative of the followers of Cord, is also a well-known and influential priest, but those who follow Cord, aka Marduk, are not a big fan of titles. They believe you should stand on your own honor and accomplishments rather than asserting some kind of artificial authority. And of course, Father Marland, an old, well-respected priest of Sirius, who is also the official representative of the Hand of Sirius in the court. Other members of the court who are not pictured include Castle March, that is to say, the Marquis of the province of Castle, Seneschal Farmer, who is the burgher/mayor of the city of Castle, whose rank is equivalent to a count, and who is actually the person in charge of the palace guard and the personal safety of both royal families, though again, his role was devolved to Lady Redpath in the video, and frankly, she isn't necessarily the type to cede jurisdiction in an emergency, even when the chain of command is fairly clear that she should. There's also Lord Darien Hamata, the spy master, who runs an intelligent organization separate from the Hand of Sirius, from military intelligence, and from the various ducal organizations. Also present was King Hando's daughter, Crown Princess Haruyo von Smith, who is only about 14 years old, so not a romantic option for the players, and 2 of King Edward's 3 children, though the Crown Prince was not present. Andrew Midgard, though I pictured him briefly, is actually not present. That was shorthand because his father, Count Midgard, had sent his steward, partially for the specific purpose of vouching for the heroism of the party, recognizing their help with the inexorable project, and in stopping the Undead in Woodbridge, which is dangerously close to his own county. If you were wondering, I briefly mentioned that during the court's recess, while Zahir and Mahar were investigating in town, a member of Draven's staff tried to get the Marquis into the closed meeting about the peace offer. This was actually Porter, his and Ivana's unofficial chief of staff, who did in fact negotiate with one of Lord Unther's aides, and, arguing that Draven already knew about the offer, had a very personal stake in it, and could help provide the unique perspective of a member of the deposed Verandi nobility who was also experienced in fighting the Diluvians down south. And Porter did get him into the meeting. It may not have been all that interesting, but it was one more thing that helped reinforce Draven's importance and prestige, to be remembered later on, hopefully. One other thing I'd like to note, if you were wondering why I changed images of Chibi Ivana when they reached the court, Ivana makes a point of wearing blue the majority of the time, to emphasize her husband's Verandi roots, since that is the source of his title. But before their caravan reached Castle, she changed clothes, not only to make sure she wore her finest to meet the king and other nobles, but also to change into something green, the color of Vistria, more patriotic. Lastly, I should mention one bit of King Edward's long speech praising the heroes, which didn't quite make the cut for the episode. He cited a quote from Vanar, a highly respected hero who was the youngest of the Smith's party during that battle against the Green Dragon Moraga, Smith's last battle. Vanar was an archer whose skill was legendary, even though he retired from adventuring a mere decade after Smith's passing. Before he left for the faraway lands of the Eladrin, where he hoped to live out his days peacefully, Vanar presented the kings of each of the 3 brother nations with one of his prized dragon feather arrows, to re-emphasize the unity of the 3 countries led by the Sons of Smith, but also to remind them of these words, which King Edward repeated to our heroes on this day. There must be a balance between the need of the state to organize with united purpose for the common good and the needs of those individuals who can never achieve their best within such a structure. Don't forget to like these videos, and if you want to listen to more of me, you can always follow me on Twitter at TalesDDC, on Facebook I'm Demonac AGC, and I'm starting a new Tumblr where I'll post the occasional image and some other thoughts, mostly about the design, production, and other aspects of my YouTube channel and TDDC. That's at demonac.tumblr.com.